Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we have two experts that will explain to us the situation that has begun with the attack of the Russian Federation on Ukraine. Dr. Najmedin Meshkati is a professor of civil and environmental engineering and international relations at the University of Southern California. He is an associate ex-research fellow with the project on managing the atom at Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at the Harvard Kennedy School, and was a Jefferson Science Fellow and a Senior Science and Engineering Advisor, Office of Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary of State, U.S. Department of Washington, D.C. Ms. Kateryna Pavlova works for the State Agency of Ukraine on Exclusion Zone Management as the head of the Department for International Cooperation and Public Relations. She also serves as the acting head of the State Agency for the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone Management. She was also appointed Chief of the Staff for combating the Chernobyl fire. She coordinates G7 and the IAEA projects related to the decommissioning of the nuclear reactors and radioactive waste and management at Chernobyl. She also participated in the G7 working group against the spread of weapons of mass destruction and physical security. Over to you, Dr. Meshkati.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Dr. Dubek. I would like to thank you and everybody on World Information Transfer for organizing this seminar. It's really an honor and privilege for me to be here to talk about some of my observation and research in this field. I would like really to acknowledge all of you that were present, specifically one distinguished guest that we have, and I see him here. He is Professor Sergei Polochi, who is the author of this seminal book on Chernobyl. Sergei, thank you very much. It's an honor for me to present at your presence. I will be referring to this book later. As you see, I have a stack of the book on Chernobyl here, at least 6-7 books, but this one I consider a must read for everybody, and I highly recommend that. If I could share my screen, I would like to start my PowerPoint. And what I will do is I will speak for almost like 30 minutes, hopefully not more than that. And then I will pass it to my colleague, Ms. Kateryna, and of course, we will interact that. Would you be able to see my PowerPoint now? Title that I would like to give to this talk, or the subtitle, is Thinking About Unthinkable. This term, thinking about unthinkable, is something that I learned after visiting Chernobyl and after investigating Fukushima and visiting Fukushima, Daiichi and Daini. This is, I think, should be the motto for us when we talk about Ukrainian nuclear power plants under the invasion and their safety and security. That think about unthinkable, because unthinkable, as I learned from my experience of last 35 years, could happen and will happen. And we better be prepared for that, or maybe better to be able to prevent that. The unthinkable could be happening. I have visited and conducted research on many nuclear plants around the world, including Chernobyl, that has been in my heart and mind from the very beginning. The very first piece that I wrote about Chernobyl was in 1989, 3 years after the accident. And I have been continuing working in this area. In 1996, I wrote a white paper for the World Bank. The title of it would be interesting. That is, the World Bank should play the central role in coordinating international efforts for improving Ukraine's nuclear power plant and the rehabilitation of its energy sector. I can share with you that later. But the reason I started with that, wanted to say that Chernobyl has always been on my radar screen, and I've tried to learn as much as I can about this unfortunate accident and catastrophe. I have visited Chernobyl and I visited Fukushima Daiichi. This is me in the Tyvek suit, but I can go around that. But one of the best references that I've seen in the last 36 years since the time of the Chernobyl accident is the book, again, that I'm very honored that its author, Professor Sergei Polokhy, is here, and he hopefully will stay throughout the talk and will participate in some of the question and answer. Sergei is a professor of history at Harvard and director of Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard. We co-wrote an article which is on Harvard website, and this is the photo of that, and the title of the article is 33 years since the catastrophe at Chernobyl. And this is our photo in Sergei's very nice office near Harvard Yard. One statement that Sergei mentioned in this book, and I would like to start my talk from that statement, is this: the world has already been overwhelmed by Chernobyl and one exclusion zone. It cannot afford any more. And as you will see from Kateryna's presentation, that she kindly asked me to use some of her slides, this exclusion zone still is on the news and it could become very hot. And then, of course, there are 4 other nuclear plants in Ukraine, which is unfortunately under threat of occupation and fire by Russian troops. And they, hope, God forbid, could be a serious situation for us. But I would like you please to pay attention to what Sergei said in this statement. There are many other statements that he made on this book. As you see that I tagged all of them. They are all very important, but this particular one, I think, fits beautifully with our context. It cannot afford any more. And please remember that. The world cannot afford any more exclusions. There have been a study about Chernobyl. I'm just showing that 2 of them because I want to draw from that. This study came from OECD, Nuclear Energy Agency. It's called Chernobyl Assessment of Radiological Health Impact. That came out 10 years later after the accident in 1996, but it was updated 2002. And then in this report, there is this chart. I would like you please pay attention to that. These are the photos of the dispersion of the radioactive cloud. This one is on in April 26, 86, which the accident started. Please look at that small black dot over here. This is the radiation on April 26, when the accident happened. The one below that is April 28. As you see, the radiation cloud travel north and south. The lowest one is April 30. 4 days after that, you see that it is spread. This is on the top right is May 2nd. Then lower than that is May 4th. And by May 6th, you see that radiation is spread all over. This is why we say that in my business, a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident everywhere. Again, I repeat it again, a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident anywhere. I just want to show you one slide here that I don't know why it goes. Yeah, as an example of traveling radiation, how would the dispersion happens? This was an accident that happened on August 8, 2019 at a Russian test range. As you see, this test range is on the north area of Russia, very close to the Barents Sea. This is where that accident happened. There has been study of this accident by Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization. This Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization was created in 1996. Remember, that's 10 years after the Chernobyl. That's why some of the modeling tools, techniques, and computer models and dispersion modeling that they do for this accident didn't exist at the time of Chernobyl. But just, I want to show you as an example. This is the map of the world. And this area, the dots, the black dot on the top, you see near the Barents Sea, is the place of that accident. And then if you see over here, it says on the top left, August 8, 2019 at 9 o'clock. I would like you to pay attention to the date as it changes and the radiation cloud that starts from that dot near the Barents Sea. And you will see how the radioactive cloud disperses. And it was not a major uncovering of the reactor. It was a criticality accident. Okay, the animation starts. Please look at that and look at the clock and the date. See, it started on August 8. The end is August 19. And by August 19, if you see this area that I move my cursor on the bottom of the screen is the Persian Gulf and Sea of Oman, and then Indian Ocean. And this radiation from this small radiation release, or moderately small radiation release, dispersed all over the Europe. This is what we should be thinking about this. This was unthinkable, but that happened. And God forbid if something like that happens as we speak in one of the 4 nuclear plants in Ukraine, or with the Chernobyl exclusion zone that Ms. Kateryna will be talking more about that hopefully later. Okay, let me move on. You saw this animation. Again, once more, because this is much more effective than my talk. Okay, that's the reason that now you can visualize and internalize this map that I showed you earlier, that how the radiation traveled and the effect of that. There have been another study, which is a very famous study in 2005, that's called Chernobyl Legacy, Health, Environmental, and Socioeconomic Impact. And there were all these UN specialized agencies and then also, in addition to that, World Bank Group was a part of that. And 3 countries of Belarus, Russian Federation, and Ukraine also participate in that. Some of the data that I will be using is coming from that, but I would like to share with you this particular map, which is the effect of the cesium-137 in Ukraine and Belarus. As you see that this is the Chernobyl plant, you see that in the center low of the graph. And then you see that some areas in the country, which is not Belarusia or Belarus, got very much affected. In fact, the city of Gomel that you see over here is one of the most heavily impacted area, because when the radiation traveled from Chernobyl, it went over there and it went over the city of Gomel, it rained. That's what it brought down the radiation. That's why I would like to concentrate. Everybody knows about Ukraine, that Ukraine suffered greatly. But for the purpose of engineering diplomacy, subtitle of my talk, I would like to concentrate on Belarus and tell you why I'm concentrating on Belarus for the purpose of this talk and for the balance of this talk. I would like to look at the consequence of Chernobyl for Belarus in terms of human toll, environmental impact, and cost. And this, my data is coming from all these reports and some major credible mainstream media. The human toll for Belarus, basically, it got twice the normal rate of birth defects in the area of the accidents. And then the thyroid glands of more than 150,000 people were affected. And the health ministry of Belarus recorded a 161% increase in the birth defect from 86 to 93. 161% increase in birth defect. That is another reason that Belarus human toll was very big. There are more data about that, but I skip in the interest of time. On the environmental impact for Belarus, we have radioactive fallout resulting from Chernobyl detected from all over the world. There were 2 million acres of land in Belarus and Ukraine comprising 20% of their farmland. They could not have been cultivated because of that. It may have got better lately, but this data was right after the accident, 1990. Then the cost of that for Belarus, this is something I would like you to pay attention. The total cost of the accident was considered to be $600 billion. But in the case of Belarus, this is a very important number that was reported by the by the foreign minister of the country at the UN General Assembly. 20% of the national budget of Belarus will be spent on dealing with the consequence of the Chernobyl's catastrophe. That's why I consider Belarus is becoming a very important player in this situation that we talk about. Now let's look at Ukraine power plants, and then I'll come back to Belarus again. These are the map of the Ukraine power plants. You see that this is on the south, we have 2 power plants, Zaporizhia and South Ukraine. The Zaporizhia is the one that got fire and was invaded by Russian troops, and the operators are working on at the gunpoint. Then in the north, we have Ronovo or Renivi nuclear power plants and Khalmynsky. And then this is, of course, the Chernobyl exclusion zone that still it stores a lot of nuclear waste and needs constant monitoring. And I will be talking about that based on Kateryna's excellent PowerPoint. And this is a map that I got from a credible source that shows the way that Russians, they envision capturing these power plants. This was right before the invasion, and it was updated the day after that. I haven't seen any new update on that. But you see that those 4 power plants, the 2 in the south and then 2 in the north, and of course the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which is very close to the Belarusian border over there. And some of this direction of Russian troop movement and that may have been changed, and that I haven't seen any update to that. But what it tells that these 4 nuclear plants are very much on Russia's radar screen. They may not want to damage it. They may not have the intention of destroying them because of course, obvious reason, but they would like to control that. That's based on my reading and understanding. Of course, I'm more open to other suggestions of Russians' intent vis-a-vis these power plants. And what is the implication of this Chernobyl? The first lesson that we learned from, or the premise for some suggestion that I have, The first lesson that emerged from Chernobyl is we need to have international collaboration during the peace and unfortunately now during the war. We have to basically mobilize international community because as you see, radiation fallout, they don't stop at the geographical or political borders. They transcend border. Radiation transcends border, and we need international collaboration. I said that in 1989, and been repeated many times by many people, even before me, a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident everywhere because of the obvious reason. And the third statement is the statement that our colleague, Professor Sergei Polokhy said, the world has already seen one Chernobyl and cannot afford a second. We need to mobilize international collaboration and cooperation in order to try to prevent another Chernobyl and another exclusion zone. And during the fog of war, and because of the war, or this thing unfortunately could happen at any one of these 4 operating nuclear plants. And this is not unthinkable. Okay, what is my suggestion? I'm approaching the end of my time. What I call that for an engineering or nuclear safety diplomacy initiative. If you remember, I talked about Belarus in the beginning. And this is based on my reading of track 1, track 2 diplomacy. And I teach, and I have developed a course, and I teach a course at USC called engineering diplomacy. Let's look what. Belarus, as you saw, has already greatly suffered from Chernobyl accident. We saw that. Belarus can greatly suffer from a nuclear accident at Rivne and Khalmynsky, the 2 northern plants. In that case, Belarus has seen the consequence and could be greatly receiving more consequences. Belarus is the only major ally that Russia has in this war. They are basically giving Russian troops a place to stay, and there may be invasion from the Belarusian side with the Belarusian troops, as we heard that yesterday or the day before in that. In that case, Belarus is really a major stakeholder and a unique position in this conflict. And I think Belarus can and should lead a nuclear safety diplomacy initiative mediation under the auspices of UN Security Council and with the help of IAEA to basically try to, at least, if not to stop the conflict, help Ukraine with working with Russia and international community to declare these 4 nuclear plants safe haven for their employees, for their families. No, I'm not talking about no-fly zone, because this is the ground troops that are attacking them. No-fly zone, well, I call it even more. These 4 nuclear plants area and Chernobyl site needs to be declared as safe haven for workers and for their families. And the final thought that I have is the following. War, we have heard this statement many times before. War is the continuation of politics or diplomacy by other means. That's a famous statement by von Clausewitz. But I submit to you that engineering or nuclear safety diplomacy is a means to the end. What is the end? To stop the, quote, special military operation. And again, as you see, I try to be politically correct here by not calling that war. If Russian wants, they call it a special military operation, let them call it a special military operation. But at least stop that. Stop that at this 4+1 safe haven, 1 becoming the Chernobyl site. I would like right now to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I would like to bring some very good slides and appeal from Ms. Kateryna that she is with us, and move to her presentation. I think I have finished about the time of my presentation, and Dr. Durbach will be happy because of that. Okay, let me stop here my slides and move to Ms. Kateryna's slide, which is very related, and she has beautiful pieces. And do you see her title slide?
Yeah.
Information Sharing Initiative. Okay.
Yeah.
I go to her slides over here. This is one of her very important slides that she put together. And this basically shows the exclusion zone and all the sites around this exclusion zone that unfortunately Ukraine and the authorities at the exclusion zone, which has 6,000 workers, they have lost control. And each one of those facilities, we will go back to that in the next slide when you see. Ukraine has no longer control of any one of these radiation hazard material on exclusion zone. One of them is the new safe containment and shelter. The other one is a spent fuel storage facility. There are two storage pools, pool number 1 and then pool number 2. And then they have Chernobyl liquid radioactive waste processing plants that Ukraine lost control of that. And Kateryna, please feel free to interject, interrupt. I'm using your slides and you are the expert on that, but you kindly asked me to present that. Chernobyl solid radioactive waste processing plant has been lost. I mean, Ukrainian officials, they don't have control on that. These were all those facilities in the previous slide that you saw Kateryna identified in her slides. And Burkukova radioactive waste disposal site also is out of control. Radioactive waste disposal site, third stage of Chernobyl, is also out of control. And Pilidicini radioactive waste site is also out of control. And vector complex, that was another one of the complex that she identified in her slides, is totally gone. And then this is also something about the contamination by the cesium, which was on year 1996. But this is a very, very telling slide from Kateryna's slide again, that if you see the road and bridges are destroyed, Russian troops are trying to enter the exclusion zone and the plant. And then just as of yesterday or the day before yesterday, that finally Russian allowed the shift to be rotated, some of the shift to go out and the new shift to come. I read that many of the operators and the new shift, they have the problem getting back to Slovuche or home because of the roads and bridges were destroyed. So that's another problem that we have, as you see that it is on her slides. And then Kateryna has very good list of potential risk of Chernobyl for the world. I would say for the world, it's not only Ukraine, Belarus, or Russia. This is because of that risk of radiation fallout traveling is for the world. Increased radiation to exclusion zone and surrounding area due to failure of containment or cooling reserve from ignorance and sabotage. Sabotage is also another one, as you have heard, that the false flag operation of Russia that could have caused some issues. Removal of radioactive material for disposal within Ukraine and other location. This is also another big threat
You can keep going. It looks like someone made a noise.
Removal of radioactive material from the spent fuel pool in the nuclear power plants and also from Chernobyl, because there have been accusation and alleged statements Russia alleged Ukraine that they are thinking about making dirty bombs from this nuclear waste, which has not been substantiated on that. And the other side of this danger is some of the sites, they lost their monitoring connection to International Atomic Energy Agency, and IAEA cannot verify what's going on those sites. That's why if there is a diversion of the nuclear waste from these sites, it could be a false flag by Russia and be attributed to Ukraine. And that's another very dangerous situation. As of today, if you look at the update number 29 by the International Atomic Energy Agency that came out today, the last paragraph also says that they don't have good connection to some of those monitoring cameras that they have at Chernobyl and some other facilities. Degradation of safety measure. This is a very important thing. For example, this new safe containment that they put over the top of the old sarcophagus, it requires the inside of that. It generates, the heat gets generated because of the nuclear waste. It needs to have a continuous ventilation because of the moisture and others. And if we lose power to new safe containment, it could be problematic. And these are some other very good points that Kateryna
Love you. Bye.
raised over there. And then the new safe compartment, as I mentioned, radiation leakage from the shelter, the pressurization of the shelter facility, inability to monitor radiation status inside the shelter facility, and then reporting that to the authorities in Ukraine and others. Again, I think I've covered most of Kateryna's slides that we decided, and I stop here. And I will invite Kateryna, please, if you like to make any further comment, if you have any one of your other slides you want me to show. And if you have any comment about my presentation.
Kateryna, could you please continue?
Yes. Dr. Meshkati, Professor Meshkati, thank you so much for this, your professional point of view about the situation. And we can consider that this situation is really terrible and not standard. And I have a question to you. You have a very extensive experience in the field of nuclear safety and security. You also had a big experience and have big experience with working with all threats, potential threats in the field of nuclear. But have you ever modulated such threats of like nuclear terrorism? And can you, like expert, consider that what is going on now, it is nuclear terrorism? And then what Ukraine and what IAEA and what actually Europe and all civilization world can do with it?
Kateryna, thanks for your question. I have been working in this area for the last 35 years, started from Three Mile Island accident that happened on almost, we are approaching its anniversary, March 28, 1979. And I never seen this situation. You call it nuclear terrorism, but I call it state nuclear terrorism, because it has not started by a renegade group, bunch of terrorists hiding in a cave. This is a state-sponsored nuclear terrorism by Russian Federation. This is not simply a nuclear terrorism by a bunch of people with Kalashnikov machine gun. This is a state-sponsored nuclear terrorism. And I would like to show your very last slide, which I think it was very telling and very important. And this is your very last slide. And the statement that you made, which I hope that you can see it, to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists in your interview is very very important. Does anybody see Kateryna's last
Yes.
slide? I
Yeah.
want the world to know that we are one little step, a few millimeters from destroying our worlds. And this is exactly that my dear colleague, Professor Pavlova, has said in this book. We cannot afford another exclusion zone. And I think I would like to salute you, Kateryna, and your colleagues from exclusion zone and Chernobyl for all the great work that you are doing. Again, in my humble judgment, this is state-sponsored nuclear terrorism.
I completely agree with that, and that this is the responsibility of Russian Federation tyranny on trying to control half of the world. But Kateryna, would you be so kind and tell us to what extent is the chemical danger of any explosion in Ukraine and what will be the consequences? And then I see that Professor Plotkin also has a question. So we'll, after you answer that, we'll move to Professor Plotkin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Durbak, for actually this platform and this webinar to share actually information and treats what its world now is have from Russian Federation activity, military activity. I can comment just that in exclusion zone, for example, we lost control under very serious and strategic facilities, and it's we can't expect and we can't actually know what it will be and how they will use all materials and equipment we have there. I also want to mention that for last more than 30 years, international society and donors help to organize and provide professional help to Ukraine to manage all these consequences from Chernobyl accident. So it was used and spent a lot of money, billions of dollars and euros to provide all the and organize to build, create the special atmosphere, special things to manage all this radioactive waste and the arch new safe confinement and all other infrastructure inside an exclusion zone to prevent and to save the world against radiation. So we lost not just control, we lost all these billions of dollars which were used to organize, and I think we done best result the world can done to save the world against radiation. So any explosion or any military activity in this kind of facilities is not, it's danger, and it's cannot we cannot account the consequences. It's impossible to be account because it depends of many other things. But the most important to understand that world cannot survive with one more Chernobyl. And what is going on today, Zaporizhia station, atomic station, is also attack and under control of terrorism. So I want just add that it's not one Chernobyl, it's 20 Chernobyl can be in one time. So yes, it is situation very dangerous for all the world, and provide some accounting or prevent some amount of consequences is impossible. It's end of the world, and it's it.
Thank you, Kateryna. Professor Plotkin, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion, and I certainly agree that we deal with the state terrorism here. The two previous cases of takeover of the reactors, civilian reactors, were in the past, one in Argentina, another in South Africa, involved so-called non-governmental organizations. So the rebels, and in those cases, the nuclear power plants were still under construction. So this is the first case of the state actor taking over the nuclear site and waging war. So it is quite unprecedented. And the world and international organizations are not really ready. In terms of the international legislation, it almost doesn't exist. And the question of the response is also unclear beyond statements. And I have actually two questions, and I wonder what either Professor Meshkati or Mrs. Pavlova would like to respond to them. The first is what should be actions on the part of the international community, and maybe in particular the International Atomic Energy Agency, and second, what is the actual situation with in Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone with the people who stayed there? I understand that not all of the people who are hostages de facto were released. And what is the deal with the volunteers? For how long did they go there? Whether there is any connection between the Ukrainian authorities, families, supply of food, medication, and so on and so forth. So basically, there are two questions: one of broader, maybe significance, another very specific one. Thank you.
Kateryna, could you please answer them, since you're working right now in Austria with IAEA? I think you can answer both questions. And
yes.
And you just replaced the workers that were at the Chernobyl nuclear plant, since they are under your control. So I think that you can answer both questions.
Yes, official position of IAEA, actually, we can see on the statements every day. And the Ukrainian side is providing 24/7 information regarding all exchange and changes in situation. And what international partners or society can do, I can't answer for this question, unfortunately. We should do everything as possible in the framework of our guarantees we signed with IAEA, actually. But this guarantees is not cover, especially this situation with war activities. So now it's, I think, is the way, and it's time to provide one more INSAG 1 in this situation, how it was done in Chernobyl after the Chernobyl accident. So it's something must be organized and created after the lesson learned with this situation, and then we can actually make the plan what international society and how we can act in the framework and the line of guarantees and sign some maybe new guarantees agreement. What about the situation in exclusion zone? It's really of course, it's really good result that we exchange the stuff, and yeah, few people it's left it there. The reason why we still searching, we don't know. And some of mostly of working team who is released, they are from Slavutych and from Chernihiv cities, and Chernihiv is totally it's closed right now by Russian military, so the staff cannot go to them homes and meet them families. Unfortunately, they all in Slavutych, and Slavutych is also under the bad condition right now. It's also surrounded by Russian military. and we have no green line to move out people or send some help there. So situation is really a danger, and of course by some little roads some car can bring some food, but it is not, of course, it's really I just now had call and information that Russian military give just one day to release to you know, like to give the open doors of Slavutich to leave Russian military controls the city. And Slavutich is not agree. They say their position is to fight against Russian military, but we can understand that, can you imagine this little poor city right now, and they will fight. Of course they will fight against military, Russian military, but we all can understand the consequences of this fight. So
Well, thank you, Kateryna. We certainly can understand. All of us have seen what happened in Mariupol, so we know what the Russians do, and the fact that they have absolutely no respect for human rights, except I guess they respect their own pockets. Professor Meshkati, do you have any comments to the questions that Professor Plotkin asked?
Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi has done moderately good job. He has traveled to Antalya, Turkey. Turkey invited the Russian foreign minister and Ukrainian foreign minister. They have bilateral meetings with them. He's after something that he called that an agree framework between Russia and Ukraine and IAEA to do that. However, as you know very well, Professor Plokhy, we need a little bit more powerful interlocutor. And that's why I consider Belarusia or Belarus, because of its situation, because of Mr. Alexander Luchenko, the special connection with Mr. Putin. He owes his re-election and presidency to Mr. Putin. He could be that interlocutor that we need for this thing. I think the IAEA Director General, if it was Dr. Hans Blix, whom I greatly respect and was my mentor, he had a great experience with the UN verification commission, which was created for the disarming of Iraq. Hans Blix, as an international seasoned diplomat, former foreign minister of Sweden, he could have made a difference. But Mr. Rafael Grossi is doing all his best, but I think it's not enough. He needs support of a leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Meshkati. And Susie, would you be so kind and ask some of the questions that we have, because we have very little time left.
Our first question is, due to the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, the danger loomed over the world as the Chernobyl nuclear power plant came under the control of occupiers. And as of February 24th, the electricity on the station was cut off. For that reason, the level of radiation has risen and several fires have been reported, as you mentioned in your presentation. Is there a possible option in which peacekeepers will help regain control of the situation to avoid a global environmental catastrophe? And will such an armed operation lead to irreversible consequences?
Okay, let's start with Kateryna and then move on to Professor Plotkin and then to Professor Meshkati. Kateryna?
For today, it's really dangerous situation with fire in an exclusion zone. If you all remember 2020, we had a big fire in exclusion zone, and it's really get worse in 3 weeks, fire in more than 21,000 square kilometers. So, but in 2020, we were prepared exclusion zone. We were moving all over in swimming pools, water, we were cultivate ground. So we were prepared somehow to meet this big fire. And this year it's opposite. We are not prepared at all. So in case, and we already see the fire in its growth growing every day in exclusion zone, and the exclusion zone is totally not ready to meet and to fight against fire. This is a really big problem for all the world, and especially for Europe.
Professor Plotkin?
I thought that I am not on the panel, but if you are interested in my opinion, I think that the international representatives, a contingent, or maybe troops on the ground, this is something that should be considered for the future if the kind of new regime, new agreement, as Mrs. Pavlova said, would be possible in the future. Again, I know that from the Ukrainian side, there were suggestions made with regard to establishing 30-kilometer zones of no fight, no fly zones. Again, it looks like it was pretty much ignored, including by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Maybe I'm missing something, please correct me. But certainly that would be the first step, and the international contingent would be certainly another possibility. So I think this is an idea that should be closely looked at.
And if
Thank you, Professor
more-
Meshkati. Do you have a comment?
Just one more comment on firefighting, because we heard the news of some fires starting around in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. There was a report that the Russian occupiers, they have also put landmines in the exclusion zone around some areas. And firefighting while having landmines makes the job almost impossible. And that's also another danger that we have been facing, in my judgment, in the exclusion zone, with this Russian infesting them with the landmines.
I think we're aware of that. That's why we're sending equipment in order to be able to help Kateryna with that. Next question, Susie.
Do you think it's possible to send international specialists to Ukrainian nuclear power plants to ensure environmental safety?
Kateryna?
We have a special procedure for it with IAEA, and IAEA is trying right now to found the middle framework agreement, because for safeguards it's also very important to have security fact that no one will shut them or kill them. So it is something what it's our government should work together with IAEA to find out the way how we can meet and support the safeguards with all our facilities.
Professor Meshkati?
This was exactly the reason I said that we need to have some sort of a collective approach to that. If it starts and led by Belarus and under the auspices of UN Security Council, just like the situation that we had prior to invasion of Iraq, and UN Security Council created that a special commission. I think it has to be elevated to the level of UN Security Council.
No, the problem is that the UN Secretary, the Security Council of the UN is now under control of Russia. And unfortunately, the charter, there's a problem with the charter allowing a rake stove.
You are absolutely right. In this book, Dr. Hans Blix talks about the maneuvering that United States did in UN Security Council to get the vote and that. And there are mechanisms in this book of Dr. Hans Blix, Disarming Iraq, to get around that. And I hope that somebody out there listens and will follow Dr. Hans Blix's approach in that. That's what I said. This man could be a person that has the key to this solution.
Well, I'll see what we can get it to a couple of people that I know at the UN. Susie, next question.
If there is an environmental disaster near the Ukrainian power plants, can you please explain how this disaster doesn't only impact Ukraine, but other countries in Europe, and what the implications can be?
Kateryna?
I can say from point of view from exclusion zone, it is very dangerous what Russia done is they bring a lot of heavy military equipment, machinery inside an exclusion zone, especially in 10-kilometer zone. And this territory is contaminated with transuranium elements. And this machinery, this heavy machinery, tanks and other, it's moving all over around and going out from exclusion zone to Ukraine or maybe back to Belarus or wherever. So they can bring from 10-kilometer zone the transuranium element calling hotspots. So this is very, very dangerous. You can search in internet what it's mean hotspot. It's something really little particle, which is if it came inside of body, a person is 100% die in few days or maybe weeks. So this is the most danger what they done.
And are you saying that this is in the exclusion zone now?
Yes, yes.
So basically the people that are there in the exclusion zone can be expected not to survive for a long time.
Of course.
All right. I hope that the people that you send there to monitor wear very good masks. Professor Meshkati, do you have any?
Dr. Dubak, if I may ask you, if it's possible, my distinguished colleague from USC, Professor Phil Lum, former chair of our Department of Anesthesiology, was on the call and he raised his hand and he sent me a private chat about a question that he had. If he's available, I would like.
Is he in the audience?
He had a question
Naj, I'm here.
About Philip Lum? Well,
my comment is this has been an absolutely fascinating and enlightening and informative discussion. However, it is restricted to a specialized scientific community, and diplomacy equals awareness. And I'm not hearing this discussed on CNBC, Reuters, BBC News. In other words, the world's awareness of impending nuclear catastrophe is concentrated on whether or not tactical nuclear missiles may be deployed by Putin. There seems to be a far greater likelihood of disaster by errant missiles or tanks or whatever crashing into some of the other remaining Ukrainian nuclear facilities. It seems to me that there needs to be much greater awareness about this problem. And one of the ways that international diplomacy needs to be established is if the International Atomic Energy Commission could also engage. I know that you stated that the UN Security Council is controlled by Russia. They cannot control the discussion and the fact that it is being raised at the Security Council. I believe that greater awareness rather than technical concerns be paramount.
Susie, one more question.
If an explosion at a Ukrainian nuclear power plant does happen, how can people protect themselves?
Kateryna?
It depends which explosion in which area and how long it take and how in which area it's happened. So it's many markers for this question, but the most important to do all possible that it's not happen. So do all possible from diplomacy side, from technical side, from military side, from government side, from all the sides to do all possible that it's not happen. And in case, then it's also a question for, how we are ready and how Europe ready. And for example, here in Europe, it's very popular to give for free in aptex this kind of iodium that people drink, but it's not, it will not so safe. It depends, you know. For example, if we take 6 power reactor in Zaporizhzhia station, it is the most powerful atomic station in Europe. And in case of explosion, we can't actually account and predict the consequences. So someone can survive, maybe, in this case.
Okay, we had, is there someone else that has a question, Susie? Because I saw
Yes.
there was a flashing from the,
Yes, there's a question here. So Kateryna, understand that there's different solutions in different areas and depends where the explosion happens. One person in the audience was saying that at the time of the threat of a nuclear explosion, information about iodine was spread in Ukraine. And it is said that immediately after the explosion, 44 drops of iodine should be diluted in half a glass of water and then drunk to protect the thyroid gland. Is this a method effective and safe from your understanding and knowledge?
well, certainly not, that may be from radiation. It's definitely not from.
Explosion of nuclear power plants have a lot of consequences, not just radiation. It's also a destroying wave and wave with spreading all over transuranium elements. And yeah, maybe Professor Meshkati can say more about, but it's, yes, iodium actually it's can just protect against radiation.
Professor
Low
Meshkati?
radiation.
And only say iodine pills, as you said, only protects the thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
But the other harmful effect of radiation on the skin, on the other organs, is going to be there. And basically what I learned is, I'm sorry to say that there is no protection against nuclear explosion and radiation. Depends on the, of course, intensity and the dosage and the distance. But this is not something that we could easily protect against that. We can mitigate its effect, but that depends on, again, the dosage, the size, and the distance.
Well, I think that we will need to end at this point, and I would like to thank Professor Meshkati for a brilliant presentation, Ms. Kateryna Pavlova for your knowledge and sacrificial, how should I say, a sacrificial perspective in staying in the area and trying to alleviate some of the problems, and Susie for hosting. And I just would like to end with, since our current attack by the Russian Federation is affecting the entire planet, and it's affecting both people and destroying their environments, it is very important to study and expose that what is going on as much as we can. So anybody that can, please see whether you can get your newspapers and articles to talk about it. And we were on our end try to get some more experts for next week who will be able to continue the discussion so that we can educate the public. Thank you very much and have a safe week. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.